everyone. So I promise the one who's talking to you is not a deep fake, I'm human. And my update is newer than the one of ChatGPT. So the real-time information is that now we are in year 2024 and social media is an integral part of our lives. And AI and deepfakes have been hot topics this and last year. So this is a development that brings many opportunities, many really great chances, but also poses significant challenges for humanity. How can we ensure that human rights are protected in the development and application of those technologies? And how can we prevent abuse, discrimination, and inequality? Today, we are privileged to have with us a distinguished panel of experts in the fields of digital security, human rights, and technology. So please take a seat. First, we have Agnès Diallo, Executive Director of EUROPOL, specializing in digital identity, data protection, and security. Welcome to the panel. Please take a seat. Then next, we have a colleague of mine from journalism, hello, Daniel Howden, founder and director of Lighthouse Reports, an investigative non-profit journalist with a global perspective. And then we have Catherine de Bolle, the executive director of EUROPOL, with extensive experience in law enforcement and security. Welcome to you as well. And last but not least, we have Wojciech Wiewiórowski, the European Data Protection Supervisor, a leading expert in data protection and privacy. Thank you very much for being here. So first, to our audience, we are going to discuss some aspects from which I think that might be of interest to you, but you will also have the opportunity to ask questions via the Slido app if you like, and I will try to revisit that at the end. So let's kick our discussion off with Catherine de Bolle. Are robust data protection and fundamental rights compliance requirements an obstacle in police investigations? Can you repeat? Yes, so is the volume good? So I was just asking if robust data protection and also fundamental rights compliance requirements an obstacle for police investigations. The micro is already on.
Okay, thank you. No, it's not an obstacle. We have to look at it together and we have to find solutions together if we see challenges on our way. But I really believe that if you want to work in the security, you also have to take transparency, data protection and human rights on board. It gives trust to the society. The society also wants us to be accountable, and that is thanks to these regimes that we will be accountable.
Yes, it really is. Accountable is a good keyword, and we will come back to that as well. But I would like to know from you, Agnès Diallo, what are, for example, potential risks and also benefits in using biometrical data, such as facial recognition, for example. So how can we ensure that it's rights compliant and that it doesn't discriminate people?
In terms of the risk, I think we started to, the previous conversation was really interesting in that regard. And I think there's an important notion that was mentioned, which is the ability to decide for a people. And what we are trying to do, especially at EULISA that I am the director of, what we're trying to do is to balance the opportunities and the power that we get from technology with the necessary respect of people's privacy and people's security. We try to bring to policemen, to border guards, to people working with carriers, to in fact people who are part of your daily lives as European and bring you services that are important for you in your daily lives, the ability to do that better, and to do that better through technology. We do that, though, with a full understanding of the responsibility and the necessary transparency and trust that is a fundamental component of that contract that we have with the society. So we're very careful to be strictly compliant with our legal frameworks, to work closely with our partners from the EDPS, and to make sure that whatever system that we put to the use of our users and to people out there is very much in line with the GDPR and the balances and the safeguards that are necessary to make sure that they are powerful, helpful, but respectful tools.
So then let's ask our investigative journalists, what are the human rights implications related to AI-enabled security, and which measures and tools, such as the use of facial recognition softwares?
Well, the human rights implications are widespread. I think I'd like to focus on the word accountability, because it's already come up so far in the panel. And speaking as the journalist on the panel, any form of accountability is essentially based on the right to know. And I'm afraid to say that the right to know and access to information across Europe is actually in retreat. Now, there are a lot of different ways in which to measure this. There is a scale that measures European countries between 0 and 150. I think it's interesting to note that we sit here having this conversation in Vienna. Austria is at the bottom of the freedom of information. It scores 33 out of 150. And this is just the paper framework, the laws, not the practice. In practice, we are seeing massive backlogs with information commissioners. The European Ombudsperson, a full third of all of the cases or issues that are raised with the Ombudsperson relate to access to information. So before we can get into accountability, we have to recognize that there is a retreat in our right to know. So if we're going to hold these technologies to account, and very often that means painstaking work, it can take up to a year and a half, 2 years. We applied for information relating to a predictive policing system being used in a major European country. And I think of that now because it arrived yesterday. That took 2 years and 2 months to arrive. And it was the code relating to a model that was used in predictive policing. And someone saw fit to print that out in PDF form and send us, I'm not sure how many pages yet, because we haven't had the chance to get to the end of it. So I think it would be wrong to sit on this panel and to pretend that EU institutions are adopting an open posture towards transparency. I'm going to take a little bit more time and then take more of a back seat, so forgive me. But we're going to talk a little bit about welfare surveillance and interrogating algorithms, because you're asking about the human rights implications of technology. One of the early forms of AI that is in widespread use that we were able to investigate is the use of predictive algorithms that essentially are being used to flag potential fraud within welfare systems. So these are highly developed, or in some cases quite crude systems, deployed, often developed by the private sector, and deployed to look for potential and often small-scale fraud right at the bottom of the income pyramid among some of the most vulnerable people in society. We investigated this across 10 different countries, inside and outside Europe. We only managed to find a single instance where a city authority was prepared to fully cooperate with us. And in that case, the cooperation was somewhat coerced. There were freedom of information requests, there were appeals hearings, threatened court actions, and eventually a compromise was reached, and a good deal of that information was shared. What I find interesting at the end of this, so accountability, a precondition of that is transparency. It's the responsibility of journalists to exercise maximum pressure. What we found was discrimination inside these systems against a whole host of vulnerable groups. And the somewhat disingenuous use of proxies in order to sidestep protected fields of information. In the end, Rotterdam actually issued a statement. Rotterdam was the city that shared with us. And they thanked the investigation for doing this and said that they felt that it was important that all other cities looked at this investigation and looked at the real risks and potential harms of basically automated decision-making systems. They scrapped that system, and they scrapped future plans to use algorithms to do the same thing. So sometimes we will hear nice conversations about transparency, but until there's real pressure placed for accountability, then the agencies in question, it's easy to talk about transparency, but it's less and less often actually delivered in practice. So
let's ask Wojciech then, what challenges do we face then in ensuring legal frameworks and regulatory mechanisms in trying to keep pace with developments like AI?
Well, we have to remember that the law will never catch the technology, will be always behind, and this is not bad. This is not something that we have to cry about. This is something which is quite normal, and it's better actually to react on the current activities and current situations than to predict for the future the development of the technology. AI is the market work, it's a marketing word notion, and there are different things which are hidden inside that. That's simply one of the set of technologies which are coming right now and which starts to be more and more popular, but they are not new. And also the problems of the automatic decisions made by the system are not new. That's something which we had in expert systems already in the 80s. And these expert systems have been also used in the field of the law enforcement. What actually changed the last years, and especially from 2022, is a kind of democratization of the algorithm use, democratization of the tools that can be used not only by the law enforcement authorities or high science academics or big tech, but also by your landlord, also by your neighbor, in order to assess you. From the EU perspective, the EU institutions perspective, and the European Union as a whole, I think that the biggest challenge is the very unharmonized answer that is given to this development in different countries. We have here the representatives of the EU agencies that are not actually deploying the predictive policing, for example. They are not responsible for deploying that. That's deployed on the local level or national level mainly. And even if the agencies try to harmonize this approach, we are still in the situation where crossing the Czech-Austrian border, we are coming from the country where the dashboard camera in the car is largely promoted by the police to the country where this dashboard camera is actually forbidden, using of these dashboard cameras. So the differences in the approach are really huge. But the other important problem is our lack of understanding where these technologies are used. It was said in the previous panel that we shouldn't focus only on the big social media solutions. When we are talking about using the technologies, social media technologies by Facebook or by WhatsApp, we are forgetting that our children are using at the same time Genshin Impact, Roblox, and these are the places where they communicate. And we don't understand even these fields, these universes. When we say about ChatGPT, we are forgetting that there are the chatbots also in these universes that are used by the children. And the main reason for them to use it is that the chat is never bored. The chat will never say, I have to do the things in the garden. And will never say, did you finish your physics preparation for the test tomorrow? So he, it, them, however we call it, is always ready for the discussion. So I think that the biggest challenges are actually the understanding what the technology changes bring. The second is the understanding of the technology itself. And the third is the access to the information and access to the solutions that are in use by the public authorities and by the private authorities. That's partly what has been said a while ago. And moreover, we will never understand these technologies to the very end, the whole society. That's a little bit like with the plane.
Yes.
I'm getting into the plane, understanding that there is somebody who is taking care of its security. I would never understand, even after the school classes I had, why the plane's flying. That's magic for me. But I believe that there are the people and there are the institutions whose duty is to deal with it.
This is why we're also going to dig deeper to this in one of our next panels, but I would like to come back then to law enforcement, Catherine de Bolle. How do you ensure that Europol benefits from technological advancements such as AI, but still respects human rights?
Europol, we support the member states in their investigations, and the information remains in the hands of the member states. So, in fact, the police forces in the countries in the EU, they decide what Europol can do with their data. And we need artificial intelligence tools for the future because we receive a mass of data that we have to process and that we have to analyze. When we look for new tools, we always have the support and the supervision of the data protection supervisor. So we go through a whole process to have an agreement or not on the usage of the AI tools in the investigations. For us, what is very important for AI tools is that in the development and in the deployment of the tools, we create awareness. In the deployment of the tools, the people that are using tools, they have to be sure and they have to be aware of the biases. That is for us very important. And then for the development of the tools, we want to have tools made by people, by companies with social responsibility. What is really important for us is that we know the sources that are used to train the tools. And what is also very important is that when we bring a case to court together with a member state, we need to have a view on the chain of custody. And if that is not possible, then there is an issue for us. So at the moment, we are using very basic tools, in fact, AI tools, to help us with the translation of information. What is a real serious problem and challenge for us at the moment is the access to the data. Because criminal organizations, Europol is only responsible for serious and organized crime and terrorism. Criminal organizations, they abuse, in fact, the tools that are on the market. They abuse encryption. We believe that encryption is very important, but the abuse of encryption to commit criminal acts, of course, we need to have access to the data. So the challenge we see at the moment is that police and law enforcement community is risking to go blind. We made a statement over that last year in Lisbon with the access to metadata. It has been a year ago. The problem has not been solved yet. So we need to find the right balance between law enforcement that has to have, for me, the same possibilities as in the offline world, and privacy, human rights, and data protection. And we are striving together with all the supervisors, with all the advisory boards within the European Union to find the right balance, but we are not there yet. So we are very cautious when we deploy new tools. We always have the support of the data protection supervisor. We ask these supervisors, and now in the office we also have a human rights officer who is assessing, in fact, everything we do, also related to innovation. We have an innovation lab, we have the needs that are addressed, and then we have to find a technical solution to the needs to try to do our work. So I think we still have a long way to go, but we have to be aware of the developments and of the deployments, and we have to be aware of the biases in the system, and that is very important to us. But our main goal is to prevent crime and to give answers to victims of crime. And we cannot fall into a system that it is impunity by default. And when law enforcement will go blind, if we don't change the right tools we need, then we have this risk.
And we see it's still a challenge. So, Agnès, Diallo, how does EU-LISA ensure that the fundamental rights compliance across, well, the EU largest scales IT systems, that they are still ensured by EU-LISA?
So first, I think it's important to recognize that in real life, it is a balancing act. It is neither white nor completely black. And I want to bring back, the value that we get from those technologies. I think Catherine was reminding us of the fact that police can go blind. I want to tell a couple of stories of how the power of technologies could have helped us or has helped us. You may recall the Berlin terrorist attack on the Christmas market in Berlin. That was conducted by a terrorist who was convicted, who had been identified through one of the databases that EU-LISA takes care of, which is called EUROPOL, in full compliance with the regulatory framework. The data relating to that individual had been erased after 3 years of retention. And then it was found out by police that this individual had 14 different identities with the same biometric. But because the EU is lacking what is called a multiple identity detector, which is one of the components that EU-LISA is building today, he was able, in addition to a potential for better information sharing amongst countries, the gentleman, or the terrorist, rather should I say, was able to navigate from Berlin all the way down to the south of Europe and to escape all kinds of police arrest. That's one example where with technology we could have done better. A recent case is the case of a child that was abducted in France, or at least went through France, and through the use of a database, a system that is called the Schengen Information System that incorporates what we call alerts. So think of it as elements that are signaling either a car or an individual. The child was able to, through cooperation between the Spanish and the French police, and based on the information that was contained into that database, the child was, the parents were taken into custody, the child was taken care of, and he was put into safe shelter. Why am I telling these stories? Because what Catherine said is important. We are at risk of being blind. And there are criminal organizations out there who use now tools that are really rampant. They're in our everyday lives. It is very easy for you to forge, in fact, a deep fake. It takes 15 minutes with very approachable, very easy to use technologies. And so the responsibility that we have is to be able to protect our communities, our people, and doing that at the same time as we balance the protection of their right and their security. I am not saying this is an easy act to say. I'm saying that to be able to do that, it is indeed a work in progress. At EU-LISA, we have a number of safeguards that allow us to stay as close as possible to the ambition, and I think we do that in full compliance and in full benevolence of being close to our legal frameworks that by default incorporate GDPR principles. We are duly scrutinized by our supervisory bodies, of which the EDPS is one for sure. We also have regular checks on the way the data is taken care of, is being used. And I have to say that as an organization, we do not per se access the data other than for technical reasons. Mm-hmm. But the users have a strict code of access to the data for their use. And it is the continuous, and let me say why I say continuous. The AI Act was just adopted and is being implemented, and that is going to have a transversal effect onto our systems. Right now, we are actually going to upgrade them to make sure that they comply with the new act. So it is a continuous balancing act into which we strive and work in practical terms to balance the opportunities, but also the real responsibility that's required to be able to take care of the data that's entrusted to us.
So it's not always easy for organizations and also governments. Daniel, you are doing researches on global perspective, so maybe you can give us some examples about your researches where the innovation collided with data security. So where do you see the biggest threats?
Well, I think it's important to deal with two things that have already come up from this panel. I'd like to talk about balance, and then I'd like to speak about conflict of interest. On the subject of balance, there are very few examples in history of law enforcement agencies who do not make an argument to collect, obtain, and analyze every form of data that they possibly can. This form of overreach, which is rarely, if ever, meaningfully qualified in terms of what the benefits will be for society. It tends to hone in on quite emotional topics. So I'll give the example of client-side scanning. And this is a live argument at the moment. Should law enforcement agencies or should technology companies themselves be scanning every single thing that we exchange in message format to protect us against the spread of child sexual abuse material? Now, there are those who argue that it should, and there are those that argue that that would be an effective end to any form of privacy whatsoever. This is a debate that can go on. What I find very difficult is that the terms of that debate are then turned around ineffectively in different forms of emotional blackmail. There was a recent campaign that was commissioned by a European commissioner in violation of EU's laws that micro-targeted audiences in a number of countries that are skeptical about this technology. And it essentially accused people who oppose client-side scanning, of which I'm one, of refusing to protect children. So you have these very emblematic things which can be used to foster essentially a moral panic, and then those arguments are used in order to justify a massive technological overreach. I say this from the point of view of an investigative journalist. Once every couple of weeks, I scan my phone to see if the government of the country that I live in has chosen to place spyware on that phone. Mm-hmm. So I live in a European Union country where the government has been very, very clearly implicated by my colleagues and reported by us as Lighthouse reports to be using incredibly sophisticated and invasive forms of spyware against journalists and human rights defenders. So you will always have, and this is not a comment in any way on the integrity of my two fellow panelists, you will always have a clear statement of our right to privacy, the need for transparency, checks and balances. But in every instance where this technology becomes available, the overreach happens every single time. It's great to refer to the EDPS, and I really respect Wojciech's work, but he's a tiny agency. So I'll come to my second point, which is on conflict of interest. As I understand it, EU-LISA has been getting ready a European entry service, which is a system that's going to be used to essentially vet applications for entry into Europe. It's been being made ready since 2016. It's now massively over time. And the winning consortia is Atos, IBM, and an arms company, Leonardo. As I understand it, my fellow panelist here was in a senior sales position at Atos for 3 years prior to taking over the agency that's now meant to police that contract with Atos. EUROPOL has two members who are currently, who has two former members whose moved to Thorn, which is a non-EU organization. It's a tech provider that's involved in the push for client-side scanning. The revolving door between Europol and Thorn is something that's being looked at by the European Ombudsperson now. We have very large commercial interests and very large European budgets and very small watchdog organizations and monitoring. So there is a fundamental imbalance there, which I'll leave my other panelists to address and see what their level of concern is.
So because some of you were mentioned, I would like to give you the chance to say something as well. Agnès, I guess you would like to start maybe?
I would like to, of course, address my fellow panelists on the left, maybe complement a little bit, what he just said. I think the attempt here, and this is in fact very obvious, is to shed confusion on the work that we're doing. Because I was personally cited, the procurement procedure that conducted to the fact that the 3 companies that were cited, of which indeed I was one before, were retained, happened years before I took position. The second element is that for there to be a conflict of interest, which is in fact what is being elicited in the conversation here, there needs to be interest. And I would like my left-hand panelists, to give the first instance of a proof that there is conflict of interest between myself, EULISA, and Atos. And you see, this is what's happening. We're in a conversation where there is an attempt to shed confusion, shadow, on whether, in this instance, my personal integrity is being commanded, whether or not, we are operating in transparent manner. And again, I want to say, in response to that, as a responsible leader, and yes, indeed, I affirm that it is a principle that we work by. As a principle, as a responsible leader, what in effect we try to do every day, and I'm not saying that it's easy, is to balance the act of bringing the best of what technology has to offer in a context that still, despite the challenges, is in line with the principles that animate us. And the attempt to, sort of create the confusion that there might be conflict of interest, that there might be camaraderie between large companies and the agencies, at least the one that I am leading. This is, I would like the first instance of a proof to be given to that, given the timeline, given the reality that we are supervised and that there is a strict scrutiny that is implemented on whatever the act, whether it is procurement, whether it is the way we are implementing data privacy, and that is being done on a regular basis. So it is quite easy to be able to cast those shadows. I think it would call for a little bit more facts and more of a, let's say, transparency, which
so
has been one of the...
it's a hot topic and still controversial. We are not going to have the space here to talk who is right or not, but at least you had the chance to talk about your points. And Wojciech Wiewiórowski and Catherine de Bolle, you were also addressed. So is there something you would like to add? Because we are also running a bit out of time and still also have questions on Slido from our participants.
Well, I will add 2 things which are connected with it and which are connected also with the use of the databases to different purposes. This is one of the most important challenges that we have at the moment, and the challenge is to understand it. With interoperability framework for these large databases, we started not only to connect them, but to ask the queries to all of them, forgetting that they have been created for different purposes. And we are going a little bit to the direction where all the law enforcement authorities will be treated as the ones who have something against us, that are looking for us as the criminals, who are looking also for the people who are coming to the European Union as criminals, because some of these databases are coming from this background. So all in all, the authorities, like the controlling authorities and supervising authorities, have to first understand what are the biases, what are the problems that the users of the technologies may have with the use of the databases.
Thank you very much, Catherine de Bolle.
Thank you, and that's important. I completely agree. We also, as law enforcement community, need to understand what the tools are capable of and not. Mm-hmm. And that's why we did set up an innovation lab with the scrutiny and the support of the FRA also, to develop, to define in fact what we need as law enforcement to do our job, to enforce the laws that have been decided by the governments in the European Union, and to do this together with partners. And these partners are private sector. We do not have the money, we do not have the expertise to develop the tool ourselves, but we have to be able to count on people who do have the possibilities to these assessments. And that is why the cooperation between Europol and EULISA is extremely important, because EULISA is for us the technical they give us the technical insights in the developments of AI, for instance. When I listened to the former panel and where they talked about biases last week, Agnès and I, we were together with the Diversity Day. We asked the AI tool, give us the picture of the two directors of EULISA and Europol, man with black hair and a suit like yours. Then we asked, give a bit diversity, man with blonde hair and a suit like yours. Not women, not diversity in women. So we also have to be aware of these biases that are still in the system. That is why, as law enforcement agency in Europe, we chose to use the basic tools at the moment. But of course, with the basic tools, you will not be able to support high-tech investigations. So we need to evolve in that. And when we talk about Europol, we talk about an expert organization, or people have a 9-year contract and then they are forced to leave the organization. Mm-hmm. So you cannot ask from a person highly qualified in cybercrime that he will become a pizza baker. He will try to find a job in the environment where he can use these developments. At Europol, we do not have a lobby strategy. We do not ask the people who worked for us to lobby in different environments. But we have a policy in place when they want to have another job, and we approve or we don't approve the company or the non-governmental organization they will join. So I think it's very important, also what Agnès said, that we continue to find the balance in the digital environment as we did find the balance in the physical environment. And in the digital environment, because also we as law enforcement, we do not completely understand what exactly is going on. The large language model, what will be the end of the development? When I talk to people in the sector, they don't even understand where it will go and where we are now. We have to try to understand this, and we have to try to make the best use of it. And the European framework, I can assure you, I have been working on national level. I am working now on European level. The scrutiny for Europol as an agency has never been so high as I did see it now for this law enforcement agency. You have all kinds of scrutiny mechanisms, and you have a very robust framework for data protection and other protections in place. And we see this as an asset. We see it as an instrument that is creating trust. And our main job is to give answer to the victims, to prevent crime, and that is what we do on a daily basis. We are not interested in data of the regular people. We are interested in the data of the criminals that committed criminal acts.
And because you also mentioned the biases, I will like to give the chance to address one of the questions of our participants. It's Kim Smoter asking, laws depend on brave individuals complaining to achieve reparation. Can we really expect marginalized individuals alone to protect themselves from AI bias? Who would like to answer to this just in a few seconds, if it's possible, because we are running out of time? And yes, please, yes.
So the question of AI bias is a real one. It's a pregnant one, and it's really rampant. We know, for example, in the system that we deal with, that elderly people have a higher chance of being biased against from the machine. So what we tend to do is we train the machine as much possible on data that is as close as possible to real life condition. And as we do this, we correct its ability to work well. And so this is one of the realities, right? I was saying it's a balancing act. This is one of the realities that we grapple with, and we seek to really implement that on a day-to-day in an iterative improvement process with the systems we work with.
Thank you very much. Well, yes.
Maybe I will add just one sentence saying that definitely, especially in the law enforcement sector, we cannot rely only on individual person protecting her right. And this is the role for the regulatory authorities and the supervisory authorities like ours to understand it, and to the developers of the systems like EU-LISA to make this privacy by design, and the users of the system like Europol to find out how it works in practice.
This is a really nice final remark. So thank you very much for being here for this controversial but super interesting panel. I guess we can sum up that it will remain a challenge to balance the need for data security and also the need to support innovation. And the most important thing is that the aim is positive, that everybody wants to protect every single one of us. So thank you very much again, Agnès Diallo, Daniel Howden, Catherine de Bolle, and Wojciech Wiewiórowski. Thank you very much. And over to you, please.